Coach, 10 picks over the course of 3 days. What stands out to you initially about your draft class?
The depth up front on both sides of the ball. That was something that we felt like we really needed to address. I really feel getting those 2 fourth-round picks really helped us, coming into today and having those 3 options here in the 4th round, because there was a lot of players on the board that we really had regard for. To be able to walk away with 3 of them there in the 4th round was really good for us.
Zach, how important was the Senior Bowl to you guys? Because it seemed like there were a lot of guys that maybe they had a medical, or in Chris Evans' case, hadn't played much the last couple of years that must have stood out to you guys. How important was that?
Really important. And just the opportunity to go down there and watch every practice live. So it's not just, you're not just watching the tape, you're watching these guys warm up, do all the individual stuff that maybe is not always documented and recorded. And then different than most years there at the Senior Bowl, you get a chance to interview every single one of these guys for, I can't remember if it was 15 minutes or 18 minutes, but the significance of that is in January, getting a chance to interview, get a feel for their personality, really put some guys on your radar before, as a coaching staff, we really went in depth and studied them. It really was a great starting point. And so, that's a great question. I think the Senior Bowl was just a great way to kick off the scouting season for us. And we got a lot of guys that play in that game.
Coach, when you look at the overall draft, did you get all the players that you wanted in terms of based on what the teams picked in front of you? Whoever was available, was that the person you really had an eye on?
I'm sorry. Can you say that?
Yeah. So when you, as this draft unfolded, the teams that went before you took certain players. The ones that were left, were those the guys you really had an eye on? Or did a couple of people grab somebody you wanted?
The guys that we got, we were very happy to get. I think when you get 10 picks, there's always moments where a guy that you also target leaves the board a couple picks earlier. And I think when you got 10 picks, that's the nature of how it goes. When you don't, you're probably not on the right people. It's if everyone just falls to you where you wanted them, then but there's certainly some roadblocks there in the way where some guys that you're excited about get lifted a couple picks before, and so that's just the way it goes.
Thank you.
Taking a kicker with the 5th pick in the draft, what's your take on that, Coach?
Yeah, we were going to have to wait a while, to get him in the 6th round, just the way our picks fell. He was the guy that we wanted, and just felt like we needed to get up there and get him, and again, having those two extra 4th round picks really helped us, because we were able to hit some positions that we felt like we needed to help. And then that frees us up to make a decision like that in the 5th round. So it just really felt good about how it felt for us, and glad that we got Evan there.
Zach, you seemed pretty fired up in your call of drafting Cam Sample on the broadcast there. What can you tell us about him, and what do you like about him?
Yeah, he brings a lot to the table for us. Again, he brings some position flexibility there on all 3 downs, to be able to move up and down the line, and again, another guy that stood out, really caught our eye for the first time at the Senior Bowl. He was a guy, as you talk to a lot of the offensive linemen there, we oftentimes ask who's the toughest guy you're going up against over the course of the week. And I'd say a high percentage of them said Cam Sample. And so that registers, and you make sure you do a lot of work on him, watch the tape and do all the interviews, and a really impressive guy. He's going to come in here, and we know we're going to get everything out of him. So we're glad to add him to the building.
Zach, obviously you guys came in here targeting bench play. I mean, that's obvious by your draft, but did you think it would look as obvious as this? I mean, I don't know the record for most pounds drafted by a Bengals franchise, but this has to be up there. Did it go even more that way than you maybe even anticipated?
Yeah, I think there just kept being value there that we liked. And so we just kept adding to it, kept adding competition. And, we just got our depth took a hit last year over the course of the year. You go into training camp, you feel great about everything, and then your depth just takes a hit. And that's just the nature of an NFL season, 17 games in a physical division. And so, we don't want to go down that road again. I don't want to be there in week 12, week 13, and you're signing guys to walk off the streets and play. And so we're going to go get depth, get the guys that we like, really feel good about how we came out of this weekend on both sides of the line there.
The round that seemed to typify that was the 4th round, which may be the heaviest round in Bengals history, with the 2 defensive linemen and the offensive linemen. What did those 3 guys have anything? Is there anything in common that they have that strikes you? Any common thread that they had?
Really high upside. You know, I do think that their best football is ahead of them. All 3 of those guys that you mentioned there, they all have traits that really stand out, and we think give them a chance to be really good football players in the NFL. And, you know, if I'm not mistaken, 2 of those guys we saw at the Senior Bowl, right? Deontay Smith and Cam Sample. And then Tyler Shelvin. Tyler's a guy that when you watch game tape for the first time, he just flies off the screen at you. And not a guy that I would want to play against. You know, and that's the first thing is I don't want this guy to go somewhere else that we're going to have to face. And, you know, he's got a lot of upside and a lot of potential there, and played well in 2019 there at LSU. And so, again, those 3 guys, we're really excited to add to the mix in the 4th round. And again, they were all part of the decision there with the first pick that we had in the round. I think we picked like every 10 picks or so, it felt like. So those were all guys that we would have considered with that pick that we took Cam with.
Zach, obviously y'all spent a ton of time watching Joe Burrow's tape, or all of LSU's tape last year as you got ready for the 2020 draft. Did that play an impact at all when you're looking at your evaluations when going in 2021?
Can you further elaborate on that? In what way?
Like, I mean, did that maybe, you know, did that kind of stick out in your mind when you're looking at, you know, evaluation? Saying, oh yeah, I remember we were watching Burrow's tape or watching Burrow's games, and this kind of came up here and there. You know, it seemed like there were a good amount of ties that just indirectly or directly had ties to Burrow. So, I mean, did watching all those snaps of 2019 LSU kind of maybe impact the draft class in this year?
Yeah, nothing that, you know, obviously Jamar, that's the one that stood out. Nothing else watching Joe on offense necessarily. Obviously we signed Thaddeus a couple weeks ago. Shelvin wouldn't pop up on that tape, you know, because that would be, you know, us watching somebody else's offense. But again, just there's a lot of good players in the tape, as everybody well knows, and a lot of guys playing in the league. And happy to add champions, you know, guys that have won championships, guys that competed for champions. They know what the standard is. Those 2 programs have done an excellent job over the last decade, 2 decades. So to get more guys in the mix in this building is a good thing.
Yeah, and to speak on that a little bit, I mean, is given kind of the recent stretch here for Cincy, is it important to kind of have guys who are familiar with winning and to immediately infuse that into the locker room? I mean, how much of that was part of the conversation?
That's a positive. It is, you know, and again, we're adding guys that have talent. We want guys that have talent and can come in here and play in the NFL, because ultimately that is extremely important in this league. You got to have guys that are good at their jobs. And but then when you got the intangibles to mix in with that as well, that's positive. So again, we're happy with the guys we added.
With your
You signed Riley Reif and drafted 3 offensive linemen led by Jackson Carman. Do you feel like you've significantly upgraded the O-line?
We've certainly created a lot of competition there, you know, and again, that theme goes over to both sides of the ball, is adding depth, adding competition there. We got a lot of guys that I like being around, you know, guys that we had in the building, guys that we just are adding to the building in free agency in the draft, guys that love football, and guys who want to compete and aren't going to shy away from it. And we'll see how a lot of things shake out for us, but just really excited about the competition that we're going to have on both sides of the line.
With your 3 rookie offensive linemen, are you just going to have them focus on one position on the line right now, or are you going to ask them to maybe build more versatility from the start?
I think ideally that they walk in and we've got in our own minds how we're going to use those guys right out the gate and what position. I'm not going to get into that today necessarily, Charlie. That's a good question. But again, we do think that these guys have versatility. So if we need it and we want to ask it of them, these guys do have the versatility to do it. I've seen Deontay play guard at the Senior Bowl. You know, he played tackle in the game this year there at East Carolina. I'm trying to go down. You know, Trey brings flexibility there. He played center at Georgia. We think he can play guard as well. And then Jackson obviously played tackle, you know, his entire career at Clemson, and we're going to work him at guard to start out. So, you know, we do have a vision for those guys, how we're going to use them, but they do have flexibility for the future as well.
2 more minutes. During the draft, there's the addressing a need and taking the best player on the board. How did that shake down in terms of addressing the trenches as much as you had? Because obviously there was a need, both offensive and defensive line. You addressed it multiple times, but were they the best players on the board or close to when you were addressing a need potentially?
Yeah, agree with that. You know, there were certainly times we could have taken players at other positions. That maybe we felt like we could add some depth at those positions that ultimately we didn't, just because we felt like there was a good player sitting there staring us in the face. And you know, we're happy that we were able to add those guys.
The
Like along
draft is
those
over,
lines-
but the
Go ahead, Jay.
I was gonna say the draft is over, but the workday is not. Going into the free agency here, is there an area that you weren't able to hit on in the draft that you're going to specifically target?
Yes, yes, there is. I'm not going to put it out there yet, but yeah, those are the conversations that are going on as I walked out here to talk to you all.
The key to the draft seemed to be that trade, because it opened up, you know, obviously gave you 2 more picks in that 4th. It let you get the kicker. I mean, that seemed to kind of set the tone for the rest of the day, for the rest of the draft.
I don't disagree with that. You know, it did feel really good to wake up today because we only had that 1 pick that we were going to sit there with in the 4th round. There was a lot of players we wanted to add, and we were able to get 3 of them. And that is significant, you know, because that's an area of the draft. I'm talking about that round specifically where you're able to add a lot of competition and depth to your roster and get players who belong in this league. And so to get those 3 picks in that area and then quickly there in the 5th round with I think the 6th or 7th pick there was really good for us.
Last question.
That kind of back to what Lap asked a little bit. Would somebody have had to jump really off the page at you in the back 7 to take them? You spent obviously a lot of the last couple of off seasons addressing the back 7 and the draft last year with all those linebackers. Would somebody have just had to wow you to the point where we got to take that guy?
No, there were some guys that stood out. You know, I think maybe Box asked that question earlier. If guys get picked right before your pick, you know, that maybe is an area once or twice where that happened. There were some guys that we liked, and other teams liked them as well.
If there was a tie, it didn't go to the runner, but if there was a tie, did it go to the lineman?
That one's a hard one to answer. You know, we got grades on everybody. We slot them. And again, we ultimately rely on the board to make that decision in those moments. And Duke does a great job of orchestrating all that. You know, and somebody asked about the Senior Bowl earlier. I would point out Chris Evans. That was a guy really. Brian and I sat right there in the end zone, right behind those offensive linemen, and you could kind of see over the one-on-ones of the linemen into the one-on-ones of the running backs and the linebackers and safeties. And this kid from Michigan just kept putting on a show in the one-on-ones, and so intrigued us. And then you get a chance to have those interviews at night with the guys. And so, hey, this guy had just beat every linebacker in a one-on-one and had great hands and was effortless with them. And so then you get the chance to interview him, and man, he's got a really extremely high football IQ and could talk through the protections in their scheme. And you know, circumstances were tough. They got a lot of talent there in Michigan. And so just to go back to your Senior Bowl question, I think Chris is a great example of had he not been at the Senior Bowl, he might not have been fully on our radar to the ability that he was. And so for him to be there and be able to showcase his skills, we're really happy with adding Chris to the roster. He's going to have a real chance to compete.